Good day, fine human beings. I'm happy to be here talking about things that matter. Last week we talked about, I started talking about mind control and saying we need to name this. We need to not just think of it as some, theory or something, but actually name it and start looking at all of the ways that mind control is delivered. There's a very real possibility. Okay, that's being conservative. Probability, reality that we've been living under a kind of mind control spell, not as a fantasy, but as a system of entrainment that has been in place since we were born, since before we were born. In fact, forever, for millennia, just in different forms. So today I want to gently name the delivery systems that keep this spell of entrainment in place. Because if we can recognize them, if we can see how this is being delivered, then we can extricate ourselves from it. Okay, so I want to reassure you that this is not about paranoia. It's really about pattern recognition. Pattern recognition. Conspiracy theorists get a bad name. What they're really good at is pattern recognition. Pattern recognition is it's a form of intelligence. It's something that is pretty strong in me too, pattern recognition. When you see the architecture, you stop making it personal, right? It's less pressure on you because you realize, oh, this is part of a pattern. This is part of something way bigger. So, if anything feels overwhelming that I'm talking about, just breathe. We're not victims of this system unless we take that on as a belief. We are observers of it once we become aware, and observers have power. If you can name something, if you can call it out, then you are distinct from it. So let's talk about all these different layers through which the spell of entrainment or mind control is currently operating. All right. So the first big layer we could say is narrative control. All right. Narrative control. And that happens through the media. That happens through the psyops that are multi-layered, multi-dimensional psyops that are active. And, this happens a lot through repetition, right? Repetition creates belief. You can repeat the most ridiculous thing, but if you say it over and over enough times, people start to believe it. Have you noticed that? I'm sure you've noticed that. So repetition creates belief. And it's important to remember that can work against us, but it can also work for us. You can repeat to yourself what is true, what is really true about yourself to foundationalize, I don't even know if that word exists, your belief in the truth about yourself, right? So repetition is how a lot of this is done, right? You hear it enough times out there in the noise and it starts to be something, you start believing it, right? You start accepting it. Trauma events. Okay, we've all been party to many different trauma events in the course of our lifetime. Audacious public trauma events, and I don't have to name them. You know the ones I'm talking about. In addition to the ones that occur in our personal lives, in our personal sphere, but these mass trauma events, public trauma events, imprint our nervous system And, under trauma, our ability to think critically is suspended, and that is when the subconscious can be programmed. Okay? That's how it works. And in MK Ultra mind control, they were well aware of this. That was why mind control was trauma-based, right? About fractioning the psyche. So when trauma occurs, we don't have the ability to be the gatekeeper of our subconscious mind, right? Through the fear, right? The fear bypasses our discernment. And so that's when the subconscious is programmed, right? So we have repetition and we have trauma events, public trauma events, which imprint the nervous system. And then the subconscious gets programmed. And then we have these, and it gets programmed through repetition, right? These hero-villain narratives that are often, that ensue, right? Once there's been a big public trauma event, then the hero-villain narrative gets people emotionally hooked, right? And that's the programming. So how can we tell if we are being mind controlled through a narrative? Well, the tell is that when you when the narrative is propagated, you feel activated, outraged, addicted to updates about a situation. You feel a sense of urgency, but you feel no agency, right? You don't feel like you don't feel sovereign in your being. You're agitated, you're out of your body, your nervous system is tight, right? And we see this happening all the time. So all of these traumatic events, all of these wars, all of these terrible things that are happening all over the planet that are, in my view, deliberately brought about, have also, for their effect, massive trauma on massive scales, and that leads to massive mind control situations. All right. So if you are feeling that way when you become aware of something in the narrative out there, breathe, right? It doesn't mean that we are not affected by these terrible things that are happening. Of course you are. If you're human, you are affected. It has an effect on us. I'm not saying it doesn't, but we have to pay attention. If we are out of our body and super activated, then our emotions are taking over and preventing us from thinking critically, preventing us from seeing how the narrative is being manipulated and how we are being manipulated through the narratives. So, we can feel what we feel, we can process that emotional energy, but we need to keep our minds sharp, right? If the system keeps you reactive, then it keeps you programmable. Does that make sense? We've got to be on the lookout for that kind of thing. And this is not just the mainstream news either, it's also the alternative media. The alternative media is infiltrated as well, right? So again, it's not about paranoia, it's about discernment. Can you see what's going on? The spell is not about left or right. It's not about one side or the other. It is about reaction. It is about the reactivity, right? How people get triggered and have no control over themselves and cannot take a breath and see what is going on when it is so obvious, right? Someone over here takes an action and a bunch of people don't like that person, they don't like that leader, so they get in an uproar about it, start posting on social media, and then other people who disagree get on the other side and are like, right? And then you got both sides against each other. Oh my gosh, people. Take a breath. Look at what's happening. You are being manipulated, right? The two puppets on this side are being manipulated by the same puppet master. Don't fall for it. This is just basic mind control tactic. Okay? We can all take a breath. We can all feel what we feel. But there's a big difference between being reactive and being responsive. Right? This is 101 for us, right? We need to learn the difference between reactivity and response ability. Okay, so that's one of the main delivery vectors, this narrative control through the media and these psyops that are just, multi-layered. You got to be very sharp, and you have to not let yourself be carried away by emotion. All right? We can feel. Feeling is not the same thing as being carried away by emotion. Okay. So, another vector for mind control, another way that this spell of entrainment is kept alive, is through the installation of authority, seeming authority, through educational and religious institutions, institutionalized systems, all right? I want to be gentle but clear about this. All right, let's start with the educational systems that encourage obedience over critical thinking and curiosity, questioning, right answers over inner knowing, that encourage linear logic over embodied intelligence. I don't know about you, but I grew up in the United States taking those standardized tests with the number 2 pencil, filling in the little hole. That was how we were tested. That was how it was determined, our scores, if we were going to get into universities and things like that. And I just remember really objecting in my soul to those stupid standardized tests, and by the way, the number 2 pencil, there's something interesting about that, graphite and cedar wood and, little spells that you're casting on yourself. We'll get into that right now, but we were told to just pick between options, right? There was no room for real development of critical thinking and questioning, and that was not encouraged, let's say, overall, right? So you learn as a kid. My memory is that I learned how to get through those tests and how to get through any test by learning what I knew they wanted me to repeat, just parrot back to them, and then forget it when it was over, right? Then it becomes about just getting the grades, just climbing the ladder, getting to the next rung on the ladder through their system, right? That is very flat thinking. It doesn't teach us how to be deeply feeling and perceptive human beings. And when in doubt, choose C. Good one. Okay, and then there is religion. Okay, now I differentiate between spirituality and religion, all right? When I'm talking about religion, organized religion, I'm just honestly saying that is one of the strongest means of mind control on the planet currently, and that is by design. And the God of religion, it is not the universal creator that we come to feel and sense within ourselves as source when we have a relationship with ourselves, okay? So I'm sorry if it offends you to hear what I'm going to say, but this is, I'm just being transparent and sharing that, God externalized, it is a form of mind control. The universal creator, source, we are fractal source. That's what we are. It's not out there. It is within us. All right. And we have been programmed to forget that and externalize that source as a deity who often has a lot of psychopathic characteristics And we've been programmed to worship as a form of submission to that deity. We have had original sin installed in us as shame. And people spend years of their lives trying to overcome this shame and guilt, which is instilled at a very young age. It's the water you're swimming in, you know? And, you know, we're given this message, we are fallen. We are fallen. Instead of, we are fractal source. I mean, talk about disempowering. And worship is one of the most powerful delivery systems of energetic consent, right? When we direct our devotion outward without discernment, we unknowingly participate in our own diminishment. We think, you know, and the subconscious receives the message, oh, well, the infinite is not within me. It is out there somewhere, and I have to worship it, and I have to bow to it, and I have to measure up to it, and I have to, you know, compensate for all of my failings through worship and seeking of favor of this externalized divinity. It's that is a form of mind control. So how can you tell? We're talking about the tells here. How can you tell if you are being, if your natural authority is being usurped by these different forms of mind control? Well, when it comes to education, when it comes to religion, if you have a fear of questioning, right? A fear of asking questions. I'm just asking questions here. If you have a fear of asking questions, well, if there's a fear of eternal consequences, right? Doomed for all eternity to burn in hell. Some people really believe that. Fear of eternal consequences, right? Of some punishment that is coming. If you have feelings of guilt when you are self-authorizing, right? Authority, authoring, right? Making your own life, making your own decisions, authorizing yourself as the central authority in your life. And I am not talking about worshiping the ego. I am talking about connecting to source within, being guided from the heart, the deep heart, which is the portal to source, being guided by that. That is the most powerful thing in this universe. And the forces of control who perpetrate mind control against the masses know that. They know that about you, even if you don't know it about you. And religion was created to steer us away from that truth. All right, let's move on to another delivery system. The medical and the food systems, right? Create or engineer, let's say, biochemical compliance. It's another form of mind control. So in the medical model, okay, and now I am not disparaging the many good people who work in the medical profession because there are loads of them. I am talking about a system that is extremely compartmentalized, all right, and has taught us to pathologize natural processes, that has externalized, once again, authority over the body, separated us from our own knowing and trust of our body. and encouraged pharmaceutical sedation of symptoms rather than investigation of the root cause of dis-ease. Well, I want you to investigate the root cause of disease, because then you would quickly understand that it is poisoning of ourselves through all of these different vectors, one of which is our food, of course, and how our food has been rendered more and more unnatural, right? How many people are suffering from sugar addiction, the damage that's been done through seed oils and additives and endocrine disruptors, through the pesticides and the impoverishment of our soils and the contamination of even organic food. I mean, it's falling from the sky, it's in the water, it's, so our food has been manipulated, our water's been manipulated, And then there's the mentality that goes with that, this addictive mentality, which, believes that constant consumption it equals survival, right? The fear that has been placed into the psyche that, survival is equated with eating. And the truth is there's no even real nourishment in the food. Let's not say no real nourishment. There is less real nourishment in the food than there was before. This is a topic that I feel super passionate about. So if I get a little passionate about it, I don't mean to speak in absolutes, right? Because we have so many solutions. Oh my gosh. And the solutions are so elegant and they're so simple and so beautiful. If you ever want to talk about that, if you need some guidance with that, I'm a certified natural health coach, and this is one of the things I help people do. Anyway, an energetic tell that you're being manipulated through these delivery systems of the medical system and the food system. Let's say if you have cravings that feel absolutely compulsory, if you don't get your fix and you start to go off center, right? If you start to feel afraid or out of balance because you don't get your coffee, because you didn't get your sugar, because you didn't get to indulge a habit that has been artificially imposed or created, that's a sign that you are not the authority in your own life in that moment. Okay. I'm speaking for myself too, guys. I am not above any of this. The reason I can talk about it is because I observe it in myself, right? That's the most important thing, is that we be able to observe it, that we be able to notice what's happening, right? And then we have a choice, right? If you have a fear of hunger, right? If you believe that if you don't eat for 24 hours, you're going to die, right? A lot of people have that as an unconscious fear. And if they start fasting, for example, for one reason or another, that fear comes up really strong. It's really important to notice things like that. That's a program. And any kind of disconnection from our intuitive signals, right? Because we have been scythed from the body's natural innate wisdom and natural innate healing capacity. And, all of the ways that we can heal ourselves. So this is another delivery mechanism of mind control through the medical system and through the food system. Right? And that encompasses a lot. Let's move on to technology, frequency, and transhumanism, which we talked about recently, right? Technology, we're all aware that there is severe mind control through technology. A lot of it has to do with addiction to technology through these dopamine loops, which they studied very carefully. And I'm sure, many of us heard stories about, the people who were working high up in Facebook, or, who were in on the development of these technologies that trigger dopamine, right? And who would not allow their own children to get on social media, would not allow their own children, to get on a smartphone. So it's because they knew something we didn't, which is that these technologies were being also very specifically developed and targeting our brains, right? So we all know that feeling of, look, let me see what my notifications are. Thanks for the hearts, guys. Right? That's a dopamine hit. It does something in your brain that makes you feel good temporarily, and then you need more, right? It's just an addictive loop, an addictive cycle. So, that, and then behavior shaping through the algorithm, right? That's what, I mean, I'm only mostly on Instagram. It's the only one that I allow myself to frequent, but I notice, how the algorithm attempts to shape my behavior, right? By offering me certain things that, and you notice when you're scrolling, right? It's reading your eye movement. It's connecting into your brain. It knows what you're thinking. I know we joke about that, but there is truth to that, right? So this is the form of mind control. And then, of course, there's the predictive modeling of your choices based on all of that. All right, let's just name it. Let's just call it out so that we can see what's happening. All right, so technology. And then there's frequency, all right? EMFs, environmental manipulation. When you see certain patterns in the clouds, that are not natural, some of them may mimic natural forms, but you can start to tell the difference between what is a real cloud that is natural and what is reflecting a frequency manipulation, all right? Because HARP, DARPA, all of that stuff, I talked about it last time, that's very active. The atmosphere, the weather, all of it is becoming more and more synthetic, right? So we need to recognize that that stuff is not random. It is a form of entrainment that we're being subjected to, and so we need to be aware, okay? Again, take a deep breath if this stuff is freaking you out. It's okay. It's okay. We need to be aware. Awareness is our defense against these things. It's what allows us to be more discerning, to see, and then to use our divine incarnational vessel and regulate our own nervous systems in the midst of this stuff. This is how we navigate it. This is how we overcome it. They're not more powerful than we are. Only if you live in denial and ignorance and fear, undercurrent of fear of what's going on, because you sense it, your body senses it, but you don't want to acknowledge it with your mind, right? No, let's bring all of this together. Let's talk about it. We need to talk. We need to talk. That's why I call this series, we need to talk about these things. Let's name them. Let's call them out so that we can re-empower ourselves. That's the whole point, right? All of this frequency warfare that is ongoing disrupts our circadian rhythms. It makes us feel crazy. It dysregulates our nervous systems. It interrupts our sleep. It makes us feel, and a lot of times we take it personally, like, oh no, there's something wrong with me, right? I must be failing at life or something. I feel so out of control. All right, well, there's a lot going on out there. We are dealing with a lot of interference. It's good to realize that that's going on, right? Then you add to that this transhumanism, underlying agenda of transhumanism, of merging us with technology, which is based in partially based in a belief that we are insufficient as we are, and that's at least how they want to, couch it so that we'll go along with it. And that is, that the human body is insufficient, that we are, need to be upgraded, and therefore merging the synthetic with the organic, that the upgrades are going to be our salvation, which is, it's just not true. All right, don't believe it. It's not true. We are already, the organic human, when not interfered with, is the most powerful avatar that exists. It is a divine incarnational vessel that is capable of synthesizing and integrating your entire universal journey of light and shadow. There is no other vessel that can do that. What is happening is interference with that truth, interference with that capacity. Because the minute we realize that all of this happens through the heart, through remembering who we are and standing in our truth, game over. This is why we have been so suppressed. So, transhumanism ain't about chips. All right, if they tell you, oh, someday we'll put a chip in you, and no, that is just a distraction. We're way beyond that now. This is the idea that the organic human is obsolete. The idea of a chip in you somewhere is a distraction. The real integration is already here. It is already happening through the body area network, through frequency environments that are connecting you to that, through biometric tracking, and the gradual entrainment of our human nervous systems into a synthetic grid. Right? That you can't be separated from your phone. Like everywhere you go, you have to be connected. It's already happening. And this is why sovereignty begins with nervous system regulation, breathing, coming to your center, heart coherence, because the more regulated and self-authorized you are, the less you can be entrained. Just because all of those systems are out there doesn't mean that you're helpless. Quite the contrary. Quite the contrary. But you need to know, you need to be able to see it. You need to be able to discern. So the energetic tell here, if you are being entrained and controlled by these systems, the way to notice is, let's say, if you feel inadequate in your natural state and you're always looking to upgrade yourself artificially somehow, if you're seeking technological enhancement because you feel like you're not enough, if you've lost trust in your body's innate intelligence, then somehow you're buying into this idea that you need to be improved through being merged with technology, and that all of this is for your good. There's a campaign going on right now in subways. I saw a picture of it, for cloud seeding and how it's the answer, they're trying to convince us that all of this synthetic interference and manipulation is for our good. And it's not. We don't need that stuff. It only gets in the way. Okay. I guess that leads us to environmental manipulation of the weather, of the atmosphere. We all can reference recent storms in our area, wherever we are in the world, like weird shit has been happening and everybody is aware. And there are many stories of people, making a snowball and going, this doesn't feel, and it smells like plastic, and they try to light it and it doesn't melt, and like weather systems that don't make any sense. So there's a lot of synthetic intervention in natural systems now. That's just a fact. It's just a fact. You can look it up, right? HAARP is lighting up the ionosphere. There is deliberate disruption of the solar-earth relationship. And, that has emotional effects on us. When our atmosphere and our earth are messed with, it messes with us. We who are natural humans, we don't like that because it isn't right. So the more artificial the outer field becomes, the deeper we need to root into the real grid. And even I don't like to use the word grid because it sounds, synthetic, like the electrical grid. I'm talking about the real grid of the earth, the sun, and heart coherence, the real source of power. That's the grid that it's not a grid, right? But it is the deep source of true power. The more things get artificial out there, the more we need to drop down and feel and be in communion with what is real. It's still there, right? And our awareness of it is everything. This is part of who we really are. So, if you feel a sense of despair, which I sometimes do, and everything it feels so manipulated, right? I got to go hug a tree. And I start to calm down. I start to feel, okay, it's all right. The earth is here. She's here. The sun is out there. Even if they try to get in the way, these things are here for us, and they are part of us. Okay. None of this stuff, all of the things that I've covered today, none of it works without consent, without our consent, whether it is consciously or unconsciously given. I've said it many times, but consent is the currency of control. If you don't consent to it in your soul, in your heart, in your knowingness, it's not going to have the same effect over you. But you have to be aware of something in order to remove your consent from it, and you have to do so consciously. There are many kinds of consent, right? There's implied consent, right? If you don't say no, if you haven't determined a boundary for yourself, then your consent is implied, right? There's social consent, right? The kind of consent that is sort of forced by social pressure. Well, get along, do whatever. If I go the opposite way, people will talk about it. The pressure that we get to go along with things. There's spiritual consent, right? That is on, if you are worshiping a deity outside of yourself, you're giving spiritual consent, right? Emotional consent. There's all these different kinds of consent, and we often consent by participation without awareness, which is why I keep saying we need to be aware. We need to be aware. We consent by fear of exclusion. We consent by a desire for a belonging, or a desire for safety, right? And I just released an episode of The Grace Space with Pamela Durand, and she told an amazing story of what happened to her during the COVID era when she chose not to go along with what everybody else in her family and in her circle were consenting to, and how painful and difficult that was, and how she was persecuted for not going along, right? It takes a real groundedness, a real connection to your own truth to refuse consent with something when everybody else is going along with it, or seemingly everybody else, right? This is a very strong current, and it's baked into our programming, right, about not going against the crowd, right? Because at one time, going along with the crowd was our survival depended on it, right? But the empowering truth here is that any consent that you have given and you realize, oh, well, I guess I gave my consent there, and I don't want to consent to that anymore, well, you can withdraw it. You can withdraw your consent. That is sovereignty. As soon as you realize, wait a second, I don't agree with this and I'm not going to go along, you can withdraw your consent. That's what it's about. We have the right. You must declare to yourself, to the field, when you no longer consent with something. No, you have to put your foot down, metaphorically, right? You have the right to do that. So if this spell of entrainment, mind control, is maintained through all of these different systems, and I'm sure that there are more that I didn't get to today, the spell can also be broken. It is broken through sovereignty. Now, next time I'm going to go, further into this. We'll talk about how to withdraw consent. We'll talk about how we rebuild our inner authority, our natural authority, how to stand in that, how to stabilize the heart field, how to live in the world without feeding the system, because you can, right? It's not about rejecting everything and going to live as a hermit, or right? That's another form of reactivity. We can live here softly, gracefully. We can live in this world without feeding the systems of control. And that in and of itself is disruptive. It's a form of rebellion without having to be in a kind of reactive rebellion. It's a totally different energy. As I always say, that sovereignty is peaceful. Real sovereignty is peaceful. It comes from a place that is grounded. It is not reaction against something else. Now, it's normal to go through feelings like that. I certainly have. That's just part of processing what's happened to you, right? What's happened to all of us that we're waking up to more and more. My podcast episode this week coming up is about that. But, there is a way through this. You're not crazy for feeling these distortions. You are perceptive. And perception, seeing it, is the first crack in the spell. It weakens the spell. It will never have you in the same way. That's why I say we need to talk. We need to talk about these things, right? So, Kathy O'Brien, whose amazing books, which I highly recommend, particularly Transformation of America and Access Denied for Reasons of National Security, those really, really opened my eyes. And now everything she said in those books that were written years and years ago, is all proving true. Anyway, she always says, knowledge is our defense against mind control. Knowledge is our defense against mind control. She says that all the time. Yeah, and she's talking about awareness. You need to be aware. That's how you reclaim your own field. That's how you reclaim your natural authority. That is how you reclaim your sovereignty. That's the first step. Have to be willing to look at things in the face and ask questions and not really mind what other people think about you or say about you. I briefly contemplated wearing a tinfoil hat for this one. But I was running late. I didn't have time to go down to the kitchen and make one and put it on. I'm not saying it can't happen, but and have a sense of humor about these things. Because really, in the end, everything is okay. And everything will be okay. All right. That's where I think I'll leave it today. I'm going to close this space and I seal it in grace. And I thank all of you for your presence here today and for your attentiveness and your willingness to be with me through this whole thing. I've been talking for about 45 minutes now. So thank you for being with me. Thank you for the light that you bring. Just let it out. Let's not get too serious about this stuff, but let's call it out all the same. All right. I'll see you next time. Have a wonderful day. I love you all.